are the ELAC BS41 bookshelf speaker, the new budget king? Stay tuned to find out. Hello YouTube, Chris the Frugal Audiophile here with you on a beautiful sunny day in early April in southwest Wisconsin. It's not super warm, but the sun is out and shining. Maybe we'll get some good shots of the speakers today. But anyway, we're here to talk about these BS41 bookshelf speakers. So I want to just go over a few features and specifications of the BS41 before we get into the review. So these measure basically 9 inches deep by 6.6 inches wide by almost 11 inches high. So they are a fairly nice compact speaker. They're not the smallest speaker I own or that I've ever seen and used, of course. I mean, I have the Ooze over here that are much smaller. Even some of the Mica and Dayton Audio speakers are smaller. But I do believe outside of the on-wall and the Atmos speakers, it is the smallest speaker that ELAC makes. I'm sure someone down in the comments will probably correct me and tell me I'm wrong, but in their general line of consumer speakers, bookshelf speakers, this is one of the smallest speakers they have, and they only weigh 4.1 pounds, and I think that's actually being generous. It's a very light speaker. I can easily pick it up and move it around, which I guess is a good thing. It's something you want to move around a lot, or maybe you want to put this on a stand and you don't want to have it be too tipsy. It's a great option for that. And this is basically your standard MDF cabinet with a wood grain vinyl wrap. ELAC uses these on a few of their different models. It doesn't look high end, but it looks nice. It gets the job done. It looks better than some speakers in this range. I'm looking at you, Micah. But it doesn't look as great as, of course, more expensive speakers. And then it has just a standard fabric grill with a plastic webbing inside of it for the shell, and then it is not magnetic. It is tension fit with pin and cup, so it's not super fancy, but I think they save money on some of those things in order to give you a good speaker in its price point, and we'll get more into that as the video goes on. Now mine came with rubber feet already attached to the bottom. I got these brand new when they're on sale. We'll talk more about that as we go on, but mine came with those feet already attached. I believe that's how they all are. They're nice. They're nothing spectacular. You probably still want some sort of isolation pad, but they get the job done, and they're nice to have just in case maybe you don't have an isolation pad offhand. You can just use those and set them right on a desk, and it'll cut down on some of the vibrations. It will not eliminate all of them. So these are basically a 1-inch silk dome tweeter and a 4-inch coated paper woofer. You know, very basic components there in the speaker drivers, but nice components nonetheless. And it does have your standard ELAC metal cover over tweeter. I have heard that if you take that off, it helps raise up the treble response, but that's not the way the speaker was designed to play. I don't necessarily recommend doing that. I thought it sounded fine with them on. You could experiment. Maybe it'd sound better in your room one way or the other. Go for it. So it is believed that this speaker is not designed by Andrew Jones, but when I look at it, I see an Andrew Jones design, especially when you have that metal housing over the tweeter and just the vinyl wrap and the way it's composed. It really reminds me of his designs, but they say it's not. So I don't know if somebody is, stealing his design work here with this speaker. Maybe he did it like right before he left ELAC, because as far as I know, he's not there anymore. It's hard to say, but it looks like an Andrew Jones speaker to me, although many say it is not. So the speaker has a power handling of up to 80 watts. It is 6 ohms nominal, and it has an 84 decibel sensitivity. It's going to take some power to get this thing up and going. I know that when I plugged it into my amplifier in the office, which I have set up with the mini DSP, and it's power matched with my PSB speakers, I had to turn the amplifier up to match it with the sub. Otherwise, the sub was overpowering when I was running them together. So these guys are going to take a little bit of juice. Keep that in mind. Now, if you've got a decent receiver or a decent external power amp, I think you're going to be fine. But just remember, their sensitivity is on the low side. Now, their frequency response claims to go down to 45 hertz. And that is probably where it really starts to come alive, but it's not quite. It's still a decibel or two down in my room, in my sweeps. Maybe your results would be different. I did not really have these wall or corner loaded. In my testing, I mean, they're near a wall, but I do pull them out a little ways just to help with boobiness. So my test at 45, it was definitely there. There was very much noticeable and usable bass. However, it was a decibel or two down as it started to approach 50 and 55 hertz. Now, I didn't test up to 35 kilohertz, their claim maximum range, but I'm sure that if that's what they claim, they can get there. You're not going to be able to hear it. Chances are most of you can't hear over 18 kilohertz. And finally, the cost on these is a little tricky. Right now, they are $150 on Amazon. They've been that for a couple of months. However, when I picked them up, they were $68. Now, someone said that was an error on the part of Amazon, that they had them mispriced, and they are intended to be a $150 speaker, and that's the way they're going to be. I think as time goes on, the price will drop down. Now, will it get down to $68? I doubt it, but it might. You know, keep your eye on them. And if you want to get a good deal, wait on these guys. If you're not in a hurry, I'd say you could wait and pick them up at a lower price point. Also, eventually there will be used units available on the market. So that's the design and specs of the BS41. Now, the assignment for the BS41 speakers is to be a high-quality, affordable desktop or surround sound speaker. And I'm kind of going to leave it there because although you could use these as, you know, your fronts in a home theater, I don't really recommend it. There are better options. I would say go with like the Yamos, but spoiler alert. However, if you had a small room, I suppose they would work. More on that later. So let's talk about what they get right. And the first one is attractive, minimalistic looks. Now, I probably didn't mention earlier, but you can get this speaker in any color you want as long as it's black. So they are black. They are very minimalistic in their appearance. You know, you could look at this grill here. It's just a basic cloth-covered plastic grill. Nothing too elaborate there. It kind of gets the job done. It's definitely function over form in a lot of ways, but they do look nice, and they're going to blend in if you have other ELAC speakers fairly well. I will show you a picture of the two of them together here on screen, and you can see that although the original debut series does look a little bit different, they're a little bit lighter in some of their highlights, they are very similar in their appearance, and I think in a dark room you really wouldn't notice the difference. I think they look more similar than they look dissimilar, but you know, that's for you to decide. And I think that they are a nice size to use in tight spaces. Say you've got a small desk or a smaller room when you want to put surrounds in that room, go ahead and give them a shot. Next I have, for what it gets right, is warm, rich sound. All right? So the very typical ELAC sound is going to be a little bit rolled off on the highs and maybe slightly tipped up in the bass, although not extremely so. It's really room dependent. However, that is going to be the sound. And to me, it's a nice warm sound. Now, you know me, I like warmer sounding speakers. I don't like a lot of sibilance in the highs. And so I like it. It's not going to be for everyone, but I certainly do enjoy the sound of these speakers. And if you're someone who is treble sensitive, or if you're someone who just really likes that warmer, richer sound, I think you will enjoy the sound of these speakers. It's definitely, as we call it, the British sound. So I fired up Tequila Sunrise off of the Eagles' MTV Unplugged album, a wonderful album for testing sound quality. And on that song, I love the sound of the acoustic guitars in it. They sounded very real and present. I also thought that the drums sounded full, rich, and natural running on these speakers, which to me are a $68 speaker. So I was very impressed with the overall sound of it. Now, they are a little bit on the warm side. However, I find that the vocals are just a little bit recessed on the BS41. I mean, it's not like awfully so. They are certainly still there, and you can very much hear the artist and what they are saying. It's very, very clear, but just slightly recessed. Another thing they get right is a large horizontal sound stage. I can hear sounds coming way outside of these speakers. I fired up I Love the Life I Live by Royal Crown Review. It's an awesome kind of swing jazz band, punk band. I call it maybe swing punk. I don't know, but they're great. They're from the '90s, and they are one of my favorites, and they're great for testing as well. And so I fired up. I love the life I live, and I could hear like the drums coming outside of the speakers. It sounded like it was coming from over here as I was listening to them, and so I thought that was really cool and very impressive for a speaker in this price range. Now let's talk about what it gets wrong. And as I was talking about in the previous section, the vocals are a little bit recessed, yet they can verge on being sibilant. Now, it is minimal, okay? It's not as sibilant as the Yamo speakers. There's not that much trouble, but a little bit. I think that's just kind of a characteristic of inexpensive tweeters, which it's got to be a fairly inexpensive tweeter in this speaker, probably from the dollar bin, you know, maybe not quite, but pretty close, in order for ELAC to make their money off of the speaker. So we are not talking, you know, the high end of speaker components here. However, they're not terrible, and that means that things are not always going to sound 100% perfect or 100% natural, of course. As we all know, that speaker design is a series of compromises, and you got to save money somewhere in order to make a buck off of a product, and I think that's one way that they did it. Now, that's not to say that it's awful and that I couldn't handle the sibilance, because it's not. The highs are recessed enough that it doesn't really bother me, but it's just something I wanted to know and I want to highlight and I want to share with you. I want to be honest about my impressions of the speaker, so I did take some points off of that on the vocal clarity and sibilance. When testing that, I was listening to Always Remember Us This Way by Lady Gaga from the A Star Is Born soundtrack. A great song, however, her voice was giving me some of that sibilance as she was singing there. And then, of course, we had the Uninvited off of the City of Angels soundtrack by Alanis Morissette. And that is a torture test for sibilance. Now, that song, I think, is exaggerated in the sibilance, so maybe it's not actually a fair test, but it is going to really either make your speakers shine or it's going to show their weaknesses. And that's what it did here. Boy, I mean, super sibilant. I hate to say it, but it was. But that's kind of been the case in most speakers that I played that song on, just because it is so bad. So something to keep in mind. If you've got a pair of speakers you can play with that song that does not make her sound sibilant, let me know down in the comments below. I would be very curious. One more thing that I have to be sure to mention is that I was getting some resonance in the female vocal range. I was playing I Know Him Too by Tiff Merritt. If you're not listening to Tiff Merritt, she's a great kind of folksy country singer-songwriter artist. And in that song, her voice was giving me like this weird ring. It sounded like it was vibrating something. I was looking around my room trying to see if that was the case, and I couldn't find anything. The speakers are on pretty good size pads, so I didn't think that was the case. And it was definitely there though, and I think it was something to do with just a frequency that hit the speakers, especially the tweeter, just a little bit wrong. And so I wanted to make sure to make you aware of that. However, when I went back the next day and played that song again, I couldn't reproduce the same ringing sound, the same resonance. And so I don't know what was going on there. You know, I leave that up to you to decide. I just wanted to note that it was something that happened. I had to take off a little bit of points for that. However, since I couldn't replicate it, I didn't take off a lot. So these speakers, they do have rolled off highs. It is very much, you know, a sloping curve. Now, they're not like, you know, way rolled off, like you're just falling off a cliff, but, you know, they definitely have a downward peak as you are going through the frequency response scale. Now, if you want more information about the frequency response of these speakers, check out Joe and Tell's video. I don't have the equipment to do frequency responses. I'm not really interested in that at this point. There are so many others on YouTube doing that. Joe and Tell is one of them. I'll link his video up here if I remember, but I will also put it in the description down below in case I do forget. So check that out for more information about the frequency response measurements. Now, remember, that's in his room, so your room may differ. But in his assessment, they sound very similar to the Pioneer Andrew Jones speakers, which is also somewhat similar to the ELAC debut series. Next, the bass can get a little bit boomy. When you are dealing with a small woofer where they're trying to get as much out of it they can, they're using a ported design, it's basically a bass reflex cabinet, you're going to get a little bit of boom in that range, especially in an inexpensive speaker. And I'm going to say that these really are an inexpensive speaker in comparison to what's out there on the market. Are they cheaper? Yes, but there certainly are a lot more expensive speakers than the BS41. And so you're going to have a little bit of boomy bass. Now, you can fix that by pulling them out into your room a little bit, although then you're going to lose some bass impact. You can also fix that by adding a subwoofer. And so that's what I did. I have a mini DSP on my desktop system, and so I connected that to my amplifier. Well, I connected the DAC to it, and then I connected it to my amplifier, the BIC F12, set up the crossover, and I started to play music again, and that helped the bass to tighten up. So the first time I played the Stars Kid Knievel remix by Yoshi Hirakawa track, the bass was boomy, and also it rolled off a little bit. There's a couple of notes in that song that really, I think they hit close to 20 hertz, and they were not present on these speakers, and what was present without a subwoofer was definitely impactful, but slightly boomy. So then I set up my system, added it in the sub, the bass tightened up, and I got lower frequency response, obviously, adding a 12-inch subwoofer, and the song sounded more faithful to the original. So that's something to keep in mind when you're using these speakers. Now, I imagine many of you are probably going to use these as surround speakers given their size and their cost. So I'd cross them over at 80 hertz, and you would be good to go. I don't think you'd have to worry about that boomy bass. If it still sounds a little bit boomy, maybe bump that up to 90 or 100 hertz and cross it over there. But still, I think you would be okay using them in that application. Now, if you're going to set them up as I have them in my system with the mini DSP, external amplifier, and a subwoofer, even without an amplifier, just the mini DSP and a sub, you're looking at a $350, $400 system with an inexpensive sub. That's not even talking like a super nice sub like a SVS. That's a BIC, a Dayton, an ELAC sub. In that scenario, now this $68 speaker to me has now gone to be a $400 speaker, which is okay because you're putting together a whole system. But just keep that in mind. For some of you, you're probably not going to be able to buy an inexpensive DAC, an inexpensive amplifier, hook up these speakers, and be satisfied with them. Some of you might be. Some of you probably will not be. You'll want more from them. You'll want lower, tighter bass. However, if you already have that equipment, then it's not really a big deal. And finally, I do not like that the logo is here on the speaker. Now that's not really a big deal for most, but for myself, on my desktop system, my speakers are raised up a little bit off of the desktop, just with DeskWorks, and I had to put them upside down. So I put them upside down, as you see here. Well, now the logo's upside down. You can't turn the cover because, first of all, this has cutouts for the wolf from the tweeter, and it doesn't matter. However you put it, your logo's going to be upside down. So I don't like that. Personally, I took off points for that, but not a lot because I know that's not going to be a big deal for many of you. All right, I'll turn this back over. How are you there? Can you still get in the shot? Scoot over so that I can put this up. There you go. A minor deduction there, but one I wanted to mention for some of you who might need to run your speakers upside down. So what did these speakers get for a Frugality grade? At $150, I'm going to give them a very solid B because they do a lot right. They offer a lot of good things in an affordable speaker, even at that price. They really do remind me of the ELAC debut series, the B5s, which I think are like, well, you can't get the originals now, but the B 5.2s are like $250, $300 right now. So at roughly half that price, you're getting a lot of speaker. Not as much output, but you're still getting a lot of speaker. I think that earns them a B. If you can find these at that $68 price, maybe you're watching this down the road, maybe you're watching it a year or two from now, and you're looking at these speakers and you can find them for $68, then at that price, I'm going to give them a very, very, very solid and resounding A because they offer so much, especially at that price point. I don't think anything in that price range competes with them. You're looking at, micas, well, the older micas. You're looking at Mookies, which I have not heard. You're looking at some of the Dayton Audio speakers. Boy, I mean, I'm sure there's other ones. Sony SSCS5, when they go on sale, are about that $70, $80 range. So you're looking at those as well. But all of those certainly offer good things. I like the overall presentation and sound of these better than most of those. So that's something to keep in mind. But they are a fantastic $68 speaker. Probably the best $68 speaker you could buy when at that price point. At the same time, having said all that, these speakers, they might not be for everyone. Some people want more detail in their treble. Some might not like the looks of them. Some might need something bigger. Some might want something smaller. You know, there's many different reasons why they might not be the speaker for you. But if they check a lot of your boxes, I think that you will really enjoy these speakers, and I really encourage you to pick them up. And that brings me to recommendations. And the first one is these speakers would work great with the ELAC Debut 1.0 line of speakers to be used as, you know, fronts, but also I think more importantly as surround sound speakers. That's actually, I think, what they're going to end up being is surround sound speakers for a family member, because I have the ELAC Center and Debut 1.0 Center, and I have, you know, the ELAC Debut B5 bookshelf speakers, and so I think I might save them and put that system together when my family member is ready, and give it to them, because they would pair great in that application, hands down. I think that's really what they were created to do. I mean, I may be wrong there, but I really think that's what they were created to be, is a complement to the Debut line of speakers, particularly the 1.0 speaker line. They do offer a center channel speaker in the BS line here. Maybe it's a CS41. I'll have to look that up and put it down here on the screen. There is a center channel speaker for $130. If it sounds anywhere near as good as this, then I think that's a good pickup as well. It's going to be a smaller center, and sometimes having the rolled off treble is challenging with vocals, but you know, in that price range, I think it'd be a good choice. My next recommendation would be that these speakers would be awesome for a desktop setup when space is a little bit tighter. Say maybe you were looking at like the B5s, the B5.2s. Maybe you were looking at the Yamo S803 speakers, but they seem like it might be a little bit tight in your space. You know, check these ones out. They're a little more compact. They're a little bit lighter than those speakers, and they still sound pretty amazing. I'm using them in a desktop right now, and I think they're great. Next recommendation is pair them with a sub. They, in my opinion, need a sub. Now, can you get by without it? Oh, certainly. You can always get by without a sub, but you will be better served if you do add a sub into your system. Now, if you're looking at a larger space and you're thinking maybe these could work for fronts, I mean, I'm talking maybe like a 15 by 20 foot room, I'd probably look elsewhere. I'd look at the Debut B5.2 or maybe even the B6.2, maybe their tower speakers, but I don't think they're quite enough for that because of their low sensitivity. Look at something just a little bit bigger and pick these up for surrounds maybe in that setup. And finally, if you're someone who likes a lot of detail in the treble, you're going to have to look elsewhere. I've already mentioned two good options, and those are the Yamo S803 as well as the Sony SSCS5 bookshelf speakers. I've heard both of those. I like both of those. I think they're both fantastic speakers and are a good option as well if you're someone that likes the treble detail, especially those Sonys with their super tweeter. So those are all my recommendations, and that wraps up my review of the ELAC BS41 bookshelf speakers. Do you own these speakers? What do you think of them? Do you agree or disagree with my review here? Please leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think. But I thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this kind of content, be sure to check out Patreon and buy me a cup of coffee. Also, hit that subscribe button. Also, give me a thumbs up. You can give me a thumbs down too. I don't really care. Both are considered interaction, and really all thumbs down does is says you don't want to see more content like this on your feed, but it still counts as interaction for me, so I don't care. You can do whichever you'd like. Just be sure to do one of them. So keep all those things in mind as the grill falls down. I think that's time to wrap up. So remember, frugal doesn't necessarily mean cheap.